Hi, how are you?
Hi, how are you?
Can you just say your name and what you do?
Yes, I'm Andreina Seijas. I'm a doctoral student and teaching fellow at the Harvard University Graduate School of Design and an international consultant in nocturnal governance.
Okay, so you've created a new term, nocturnal governance. So how is it that you evolved from nightlife to nighttime economy to nighttime governance, nocturnal governance?
Yes, so we've seen over the past, I would say 10, 15 years, an evolution of studies that relate to the night, studies and practice connected to the night. While first waves of studies focused more on nightlife and the negative impacts of nightlife, such as increased antisocial behavior and alcohol-related crimes, now we're seeing that there's movement towards other topics, and recently there's been, as we were just discussing before, more focus on specific groups and how specific groups are experiencing nighttime economy or nightlife. And also, even more recently, there's new studies that look into the sustainability of nocturnal practices. So that's why I like to talk about the urban night instead of the nighttime economy. Though I used to talk about the nighttime economy before, I think that the term nighttime economy was a very helpful term to get us to understand the relevance of nighttime activity in an economic sense and the contributions of nighttime activity for a city, but a broader definition of the urban night that also takes into account other types of activities that not necessarily are with an economic nature is important in order to have a broader picture of what the real impacts and to be able to incorporate and include the needs and interests of other groups. And nocturnal governance refers to the system of institutions, regulations, and all the actors involved in managing the city at night. And when we say governance, is because instead of talking about government only, we refer to this broader constellation of actors that has evolved from just focusing on the police as the main actor to participate in nighttime management to a broader cast of actors that could be state or non-state actors, as we've seen in different cities around the world.
So I personally have evolved in my own terminology, from what we would call entertainment districts, which were always seen as a negative, to hospitality zones, which is the process of creating places for people to socialize, to now looking at social districts or social economies, with sociability as the real focal point. So it's not economic, it's not anything that translates to the negative impacts. It's just something that everybody seeks when they go out into the urban night. And that's that opportunity to socialize. And whether it's a bar, a nightclub, a restaurant, well, there's things that we consume, whether it be beer, wine, spirits, food, music, whatever we're consuming, it's the social interaction. So how does your nocturnal governance translate to the sociability outcome that people seek?
That's an interesting question. So right now what I'm trying to do through my studies and my work is to understand how different cities have different approaches or different ways to tackle the same questions. Because all cities, though we share some of the same issues, we share the disappearing venues in our city centers, we share the lack of inclusion of certain groups, we share the gentrification and all the pressures that it's creating over certain city areas. The solutions are different, and the solutions tend to respond to the existing urban structures, to the way government is structured, to the existing actors, nightlife associations, chambers of commerce, other business improvement districts. So what I'm trying to do through my research is to figure out how all these actors are forming different networks in different places, and how these networks can help improve quality of life. That involves, of course, better opportunities for sociability, but also better opportunities for work. Because there's also very important, a significant population not in every city, but in some cities, people who work at night, and their rights and their interests are not always represented. So I'm trying to, through this broader definition of urban night, also to incorporate some of those needs and interests as well.
So another social concept, social justice, is what you're talking about.
Right. And even spatial justice, because when we think about cities at night, and that's what I was trying to express earlier today, when we think about cities planned around not nightlife districts, when we segregate nightlife activity to specific areas, then sometimes these areas are not serviced serviced in a sufficient way by different public services like transportation. So, for instance, if you're a nighttime worker in a sector like healthcare, if you work as a nurse or if you work as a doctor and you have to work at night in a city, sometimes your access to transportation is not the same as other people who who work during the day. And by separating, when we think about nightlife and from a leisure perspective, when we separate nighttime activity to other districts, it complicates providing transportation for those districts. But as we were discussing also earlier today, we're seeing a trend towards mixed use and towards the densification of city centers, and that is creating opportunities now to rethink the way that we distribute nighttime activity. And instead of thinking in terms of districts that are it's more difficult to provide services for those, think in terms of how we make coexist different activities in one place. So there's many challenges. There's many challenges, demographic challenges in terms of density and urbanization, challenges in terms of preferences. But the idea is that we become more flexible and we become more proactive by incorporating data and more information about what's happening in cities at night when we make those decisions.
So what's some of your background? I know that you're from Venezuela, right?
Right.
So what was it like growing up, and what was it that motivated you to evolve to this work?
Yes, so I wasn't born in Caracas, the capital, but I grew up in Caracas, Venezuela, which is one of the most dangerous cities in the world right now. And as I was growing up, I realized that there was a big problem, which is that at night, people congregate in private spaces and not so much in public spaces, which creates important barriers to meet others. If you want to meet new people, if you always go to the same private spaces like someone's house, private parties, or malls, it's very restrictive when you want to socialize. So I started asking myself, what is the impact of not being able to go out at night freely as you do in other circumstances because of the security problem that we have in my city? And back home, I started doing this nighttime walking explorations with a friend who's a sociologist, and we started to observe who goes out at night, where, why, what sort of transportation they use. And when we were looking into that, then we decided to try to find some literature to inform ourselves, and we tapped into a field. This was 2009, and at the time the field was already consolidated in the UK. It was a very important field already. People like Phil Hatfield or Marion Roberts were talking about this. Books have been published about crime and nightlife. And we realized, okay, so this is a field, this is a thing, this is actually something that people and cities are studying. So I became interested in this field, and I ended up moving to London to pursue my master's degree in social policy and development. And I wrote my dissertation about the relevance of the night as a space of sociability for the youth, and how, in the absence of spaces for the youth to socialize, this will have negative consequences over trust and over inclusion and over the perception of safety in a city. So that got me started in this field, and that was 10 years ago. And over the past 10 years, I've become more specialized in urban planning, and I'm interested in using planning tools and planning techniques to serve the urban night, because the night is a field and a space that has been ignored for many years from a planning perspective. So that's my story.
Okay. So what are your long-term ambitions, and where do you see your future in this field?
Well, that's a very difficult question to answer. I'm about to finish my studies in Harvard, I'm looking for opportunities to continue adding value at the intersection of research and practice. I love doing research, but I also love being involved with people and working at the city level. And I hope that all the tools that I've gained through my studies and through my work can come together now and help me add value to one or more cities. So I hope that I will be able to continue contributing to this emerging field.
So you've attended a few sessions here, and with your background, what was most insightful of what you heard from some of the other people that were speaking?
Yes, so I really enjoyed this year's summit. I really enjoyed having thematic sessions. For instance, the one about mobility at night, I found it really interesting because I think this is particularly a topic that has been it's very unexplored, and having the perspective of cities like DC and Orlando is really interesting to understand where this is going. I also enjoyed having the possibility of listening to having in the same room different night mayors or nighttime representatives from different cities, and to be able to understand, to see and listen from different perspectives and approaches, as I was saying, to the same problem. It makes you realize that there's not one solution, there's not one answer to this, myriad of issues, but that cities will come up and are coming up with different ways to answer them based on their history, based on their culture, and based on their local needs. So I think the summit is a great platform to showcase all these different approaches. And it's been a great place also to a person like me that has spent the last 3 years with my nose stuck in a book, and basically isolated and reading papers. It's great to come here and be able to talk to all these folks that are transforming their cities and to learn what's happening now and where this is all going.
Now, you sat in when Claudia gave her presentation about her work in Cancun. What was your impression of that approach and her methodology?
I think it was a fascinating presentation. It's a great advantage to have all that data about a city, about a city's nighttime activity, and the distribution, and to understand who are the actors involved, and because based on that data, then you can develop important interventions, and not only that, but then later on you can really gauge what was the impact of these interventions. So I think the approach is really comprehensive. I found really interesting points of contact with some of the work that I've been doing, and I think it's great that such a comprehensive approach is being implemented in cities, not only in Canada, US, but also in Latin America. I think it's very important that we bring these ideas also to developing countries where it's very common to hear the night is perceived as this frontier, as this barrier that we cannot cross because it's not safe. But instead of having that reactive and that negative perception, we need to be more proactive. And I think this data and these sort of approaches will help us achieve that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, it's been a delight to talk to you, and you certainly
Likewise.
bring a lot of new insights and energy, and we look forward to working together, I hope, and we'll see you again.
Of course, thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.